it's Jeff Chalmers here from discoverdouble-bass.com, which is the home of online learning for double bass players. We have courses, lessons, interviews, all designed to help you move your playing forward. And today we're joined by one of our faculty. It's the fantastic jazz bass player, educator, author of the Jazz Bass book, all-round good guy. It's John Goldsby. Welcome, John.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Well, we've been talking about jazz bass all week, and I happen to have a copy of your fantastic book, and I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about your motivation behind writing the book, and maybe some of the highlights within it, some of the topics that you're excited about, because I know this is one that a lot of people have practiced. When did you write the book?
That book came out in the year 2000.
Wow.
But the work and the research was done, I'd say, for the 10 years, 15 years before that, as I was really studying the bass tradition and learning how to play jazz and honing my craft in New York and listening to hundreds and thousands of recordings that I pick a few of my favorites and address those in this book.
So the transcriptions are a really important part. I can remember the Eddie Gomez transcription is from an album of his called Dedication, I think.
Right.
And I love that album because he's playing standards, and it's also he's on top form, and it's a wonderful record. But it's interesting how I found that record through the book,
Right.
Right. And so were you transcribing a lot of these really cool lines?
Over the years, I transcribed a lot of lines from my bass heroes, the older players like Paul Chambers, Sam Jones, Percy Heath. The Eddie Gomez transcription, he came as a guest with the WDR Big Band, so and he played my bass.
Oh wow!
he got in touch with me beforehand and said, "You got a bass I could use?" And oh well, I'll sure, Mr. Gomez, you can use my bass. And so I let him use my bass the first day, and he found notes on that bass I didn't know existed. He played all over the bass. It was amazing how he sounded on my bass. And that's one thing I've noticed about great players who have happened to play my bass. They pick up my bass and they sound like themselves. They sound like Eddie Gomez. So that day he gave me this dedication CD.
Oh really?
Said, thanks for letting me borrow your bass. Here's my new CD. And so I went home that night and I transcribed that solo. I hadn't really planned on using that particular solo, but somehow along the way, then that was about the time I was doing the jazz bass book, and the solo ended up in the book.
Oh, that makes absolute sense. I can't remember the tune. Was it on Nardis or something?
Was that Green Dolphin Street?
Green Dolphin Street, that's
right.
It, yeah. I knew it was one of the ones that he played. He's recorded a lot over the years, and I think he plays Nardis on that album. He also plays Footprints, and he's got a really beautiful version of that. So you were transcribing and you were publishing these in Bass Player magazine. Is this
right.
And then how did the Bass Player magazine articles come to form this book? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, there was an editor for Bass Player magazine, Richard Johnston. Bass Player had quite a few editors over the years. When I was writing for them, Richard Johnston left to work for Backbeat Books, which is a music book publishing company. And I don't know, about a year after he had left Bass Player, he got in touch and said, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea to do a history of jazz bass players, because you've already got such a foundation and you seem to like what you do. So I said, yeah, this is great. So that just gave me more of an excuse to transcribe more of my favorite players, and also try and codify and figure out, well, what is the jazz tradition? Where did it start? Who were the early players? Who did they influence? Who were the swing era players, and who came out of the swing era and started the bebop revolution? Who were the modern players? And for me, I love all these styles of music. I love to play traditional jazz. I love to play modern jazz, bebop. So it was a great project for me personally, but I also saw it as a service for the bass community to say, okay, people, in my opinion, these are the important players, and you can check them out in this book and add to them yourselves, and hopefully one day you're going to be part of the bass tradition. I sort of stopped at about in the 1970s, because the bass tradition got so diverse with the virtuoso electric bass styles, the fusion styles, more free jazz, and all kinds of styles So I left it there. So the next person who wants to write jazz bass book number 2, please take over where I left off and cover all those styles.
I think it's a fascinating thing, and it's great that the transcription that you were doing has proved to be such a key part of you learning all of that language. Just on a side note with the transcription, did you just transcribe at the piano? Did you do it at the bass? How do you generally approach it? Is it different now?
Back then it was really before slick computer programs where you could slow things down. So when I first started transcribing, I had a cassette player, and it was hard on the ears because I'd be wearing headphones and I'd listen to 4 bars of a bass line, which was already hard to hear. Sometimes they were poorly recorded, or you had to strain to hear, which note is that? Then I would rewind, then hear 4 bars, rewind, hear 2 bars, rewind. Think, okay, I just need to get the first note, first note. Listen to it again, first note, then check it on the bass. Is that really the first note?
Yeah.
Then you move on to the second note. So a lot of times I did that at the piano, but what I would do is I would play the bass line, sing it, repeat it on the piano to check if that's what I actually heard on the recording, and then write it down. So I would sing it, play it, write it.
Fantastic. And just to finish off, maybe you could talk about one of the standout people. I mean, there were so many. The foreword is by Ron Carter, who, people like, there's so many incredible bass players. Rufus Reid is in there, Charlie Hayden, Jimmy Garrison, Red Callender, Red Mitchell, Charlie Mingus, Percy Heath, Paul Chambers. Is there somebody that you'd like to just pick out and tell us a little bit about?
Well, one player that I think people ignore these days is Oscar Pettiford. I'm a huge fan of Duke Ellington and the Duke Ellington bass players, from way back in the early days, the 20s and 30s, with Wellman Broad, and then of course Jimmy Blanton, who a lot of people consider the father of modern bass playing, Junior Raglan. Then came Oscar Pettiford with Duke Ellington, and then soon after that he moved on and was really an integral part of the bebop era on 52nd Street with Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, Bud Powell, Max Roach. And he was, in my opinion, the bass player who really embodied bebop on the double bass. And that was already in the late 40s, early 50s. Then he moved on to leading his own groups and played with Thelonious Monk, he played with Miles Davis, but he was a band leader and composer. And he wrote a lot of these great standard bass tunes that we like to play.
Yeah, what are some of your favorites? Have you got one that you could maybe share with us?
Well, I mean, like Bohemia After Dark, written for the Cafe Bohemia. That one's a nice one.
Doesn't get any cooler, really, does it?
Swing Until the Girls Come Home. Or Blues in the Closet, which I have beginning bass players learn. Great swinging lines. Or in our course, Tell Your Story, the new Discover Double Bass course, we talk all about tricketism. So he was very clever, very musical, and just a brilliant bass player, band leader, and composer.
That's absolutely fantastic, John. Well, listen, I really appreciate you joining us today. We've got a beautiful venue for the interview, which has made it a really special afternoon, and it's been cool hanging out with you. Thank you to everybody who emailed in their questions. We had a ton of questions about jazz standards. John has recently filmed a course on walking bass line construction and also about soloing, where he's talking about many of these topics. Plus, you can check out his book, The Jazz Bass Book. I would highly recommend that to any jazz bass student. So thanks again, John. Thank you for joining us at home, and we'll see you in the next video.